Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, I want you to imagine a library, but this one has a book for every single living thing on our planet, from the tiniest germ to the biggest blue whale. Today, we're going to learn how to use the card catalog for that library, the incredible system scientists use to classify all of life.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics. What does it even mean to be alive? Then we'll get into the brilliant system someone came up with to organize it all. We'll take a quick tour of the major groups, see how DNA came along and flipped the script, and we'll end with a really weird biological puzzle that still messes with our definitions. All right, let's kick things off with the most fundamental question you can ask. What's the real difference between, say, a rock and a rabbit, a mushroom and a mountain? Turns out, biology has a very specific checklist for what gets to be called alive. It sounds so simple, right? But in biology, being alive isn't just a thing. It's more like an exclusive club. And to get into this club, you have to prove you can do 7 key things. And that checklist has a handy little mnemonic, MRSGREN. Every letter stands for a vital life process: movement, respiration, sensitivity, and so on. Now here's the rule. An organism has to tick every single one of these boxes. If it can't, then sorry, it's not technically alive. No exceptions.
Okay, so now we have our rulebook for what gets to be in the living club. But with millions and millions of species all playing by these rules, how on earth do we keep track of them all? How do you create any kind of order out of all that beautiful chaos?
Well, this was the exact problem that obsessed an 18th century Swedish naturalist named Carl Linnaeus. He looked at the incredible, baffling diversity of life and just thought, this needs a filing system. A grand library where every single organism has its own specific spot on the shelf.
And this is his absolutely elegant solution: a hierarchy. Think of it like a full mailing address. You start really broad with the kingdom, that's like the country, and then you get more and more specific with each step. Phylum is the state, class is the city, all the way down to the species, which is like your exact house number. Now, the real beauty of this whole system is that at the very bottom, every organism gets its own unique 2-part scientific name. That's the binomial system. For us, it's Homo sapiens. And that name is like a universal language, which means a scientist in Brazil and a scientist in Japan know they're talking about the exact same creature. No confusion. And hey, if you need to remember that order, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, there's a classic mnemonic for you. King Philip came over for grand spaghetti. It's a silly but super effective way to keep that whole hierarchy straight in your head. All right, let's zoom back out and go to the very top floor of that library, the kingdoms. This is the first biggest split in how we classify every living thing. You can think of these as the main sections of the entire library. Traditionally, every living organism gets sorted into one of these 5 major kingdoms: animals, plants, fungi, productists, and prokaryotes. And these big divisions are based on really fundamental stuff, like what their cells look like and how they get their food. So let's see how this works. Here on the left, you've got your basic animal cell, and on the right, a plant cell. One of the biggest differences you can see right away is that plant cells have this rigid outer wall made of cellulose. Plus, they've got those little green things, chloroplasts, which they use to make their own food from sunlight. Animal cells, we don't have either of those. Now, let's check out fungi. Their cells also have walls, but they're made of something different, called chitin. And just look at the huge difference compared to the prokaryotic cell on the right, which is like a bacterium. The fungus cell has a real nucleus, a little container for all its DNA. Prokaryotes don't. Their DNA just floats around inside. That's a massive fork in the road in the library of life. And of course, inside each kingdom, the classification just keeps going deeper. Take the animal kingdom. It gets split into major groups, starting with the vertebrates. That's any animal with a backbone. That one single feature unites everything from a snake to a blue whale to you and me. But, most animals are actually invertebrates, no backbone. The biggest group by far are the arthropods, and they get sorted by things like how many legs and body parts they have. Spiders with 8 legs, they go in one group. Insects with 6 legs, they go in another. It's all about finding those shared patterns. Now, for hundreds of years, this entire system, this whole grand library, was built on just looking at things. What did an organism look like? How was its body put together? But then, in the 20th century, a tool came along that was so powerful, it changed, well, everything. Right, so scientists used something called morphology, which is just a fancy word for an organism's physical shape, to make all their decisions. If it had feathers, it was a bird. If it had gills, it was a fish. And that's a practical system for sure, but as we don't know, looks can be deceiving. They can hide what's really going on underneath.
The modern way, wow, it goes so much deeper. Instead of just looking at the outside of an organism, we can now read its biological instruction manual, the DNA itself. By comparing the genetic code, letter for letter, between two species, we can see exactly how closely related they are. This was a total game changer. It took classification from an art of observation and turned it into a hard science of data. So we have this incredible, constantly improving system for organizing life. It works for bacteria, fungi, plants, and animals. But what do you do with the things that exist in that gray area? The things that blur the very line between what's living and what's not? Yeah, let's talk about viruses.
Take a look at this. A virus is just ridiculously simple. It's not even a cell. It's just a little piece of genetic code, either DNA or RNA, wrapped up in a protein shell. And that's it. There's no cytoplasm, no mitochondria, none of the tiny machines that make a living cell work. And here is the absolute crucial point. Remember MRS-GREN? A virus can't do any of it. Not on its own. It can't move, it can't eat, it can't grow. And most importantly, it cannot reproduce by itself. It's a biological pirate. It has to invade a living host cell and use that cell's machinery to make copies. Because it fails the checklist, it's not technically alive.
And this leaves us with a totally fascinating question to end on. If viruses aren't alive, but they carry the code of life, and they can definitely evolve, then what in the world are they? They're a powerful reminder that our grand library of life is still very much a work in progress, with plenty of mysteries still on the shelves, just waiting to challenge everything we think we know.